racing over there.
All right. We're all ready? All right. Good afternoon, everybody. And I would like to thank all of you for coming to the signing of SB2. I am Jackie Irwin from the City of Thousand Oaks. Consumers have been getting gouged at the pump and have been for quite some time. Every time there is a significant increase in gas prices, we react with select committees or oversight committees and new studies. This time, it is different. We no longer need a true crime podcast in order to solve where the mystery surcharge comes from. Californians deserve real oversight and transparency with dedicated expertise to oversee the oil market and to create a plan to achieve our low carbon and clean air future. This is what we have achieved with this bill, and I'm looking forward to the results in the coming months and years. I am proud of the work that has been done, and I want to thank our governor, our Senate, my working group colleagues, Assemblymember Ting, Lee, and Garcia, and also our Speaker for this opportunity. Next, I would like to welcome Senator McGuire to the podium.
Good afternoon. I'm going to let Assemblymember Garcia go before me, if it's all right. Good Senator, if we can give a round of applause. Assemblymember Garcia, please.
Right. And that's because I told him I was going to introduce him like a WWF wrestling superstar. So that's what he's looking forward to. On behalf of Speaker Rendon, who could not join us today, he wanted me to thank the governor, his team, and the 4 members of the California State Assembly who worked side by side with the work group in the Senate to get us to this point. As some member Irwin mentioned, for far too long, there have been questions as it relates to the industry that for many, many years, questions remain unanswered as it relates to why are gas prices above and beyond other states in our nation. We had the opportunity to work with the governor's team and the Senate to have some robust deliberations at different levels of the committee process here. And although some may say we moved too fast, others would argue we didn't move fast enough. But nonetheless, we're here, and at the forefront of our outcome is protecting Californians from getting gouged at the gas pump. So on behalf of Speaker Rendon, the 4 members of the Assembly who work closely with the governor's team, and by the way, it's important that we note the governor's team during this process worked extremely hard to ensure that both houses were engaged for the purpose of getting an outcome that is reflective of what's in the best interest of all Californians. And so thank you again on behalf of Speaker Rendon for the work that was done by both houses and the executive branch. So with that, I'd like to introduce the senator who said that he would be willing to move heaven and earth to get this done, Senator Mike McGuire.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you so much for allowing me to be here today. Honored to be able to represent President Tony Atkins of the California State Senate. I believe that there are 3 reasons why we are in this historic rotunda. After all the posturing and political sound bites over these past many months, it comes down to this. Number 1, big oil took advantage of consumers here in the Golden State. Californians have been fleeced while the largest corporations on the planet padded the pockets of the richest in our society. Number 2, greed has consequences here in California. And due to the action of the governor, the pro tem, and the speaker, today's policy ushers in some of the toughest measures in the country to hold oil accountable for price gouging. And the policy advances desperately needed transparency along with implementing proactive policies to help stabilize our state's volatile fuels market. Finally, if we are serious about protecting the most vulnerable in our communities, we must focus on the cost of food, fuels, healthcare, and rent. And this bill will do just that by stabilizing gas prices and moderating oil's artificially high gas spikes. It's important to be able to recognize those who work day and night to get us to this day. First and foremost, we owe a debt of gratitude to Governor Newsom. He was out in front, standing strong for consumers and willing to sincerely engage with the legislature and get this deal done for the people of California. We want to say absolutely, let's give him a round of applause, please. It's the last time I'm going to speak here. He's not going to have me back. So, sorry, Mr. Governor. Last, I want to say thank you to Pro Tem Atkins, Senator Skinner, who worked day and night on this bill, Chair Bradford, who chairs Senate Energy, and Senator Lamone, who literally put hundreds of hours into this proposal, along with our colleagues in the Assembly, Speaker Rendon, Assemblymember Irwin, Assemblymembers Ting, Lee, and Garcia. We are grateful for your engagement and partnership. And without further ado, I'm grateful to be able to introduce the hardest working Attorney General in the United States of America. Let's welcome Mr. Rob Bond to the podium.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the very kind introduction, Senator McGuire. I'm honored to be here. Rob Bonta, California Attorney General. And I want to start off by saying today is a good day. It's a good day for hardworking Californians. It's a good day for those Californians who wince when they look at their empty gas tank gauge. It's a good day for those living paycheck to paycheck. So many of us up and down the state, throughout our state, have been impacted by the high prices at the pump, and today we are delivering a solution. So today we're saying no to price gouging. We're saying no to market manipulation. We're saying yes to consumer protections. We're saying yes to transparency and accountability and oversight. This bill is common sense. With this new law, soon to be law, we will have a line of sight and access to information that has long been in a place where it's been blurred and obfuscated and opaque. We will now have access to that information to make sound decisions. We will also have an opportunity to impose penalties when oil companies jack up the prices when they think no one is looking. And so we're being very clear today. We are looking. We are monitoring. We are standing up for everyday Californians. And our message to big oil is very clear. Play by the rules or pay the price. It's really that simple. And one thing that I'm very proud of is this, all of this, our coming together, our collaboration, our partnership, our working across differences but committed to a common goal, delivering and serving the people of this great state. We were united here. We collaborated here. We partnered here. And that is important because we have a duty, a common shared duty to our people. And when they're hurting and when they need a solution, when they need action, when they need an outcome, they expect us to work together to deliver it. And we did that. So I want to say to this whole group, thank you. Thank you to our Senate Pro Tem, Tony Atkins. Thank you to our Speaker, Anthony Rendon. Thank you to our great Governor, Gavin Newsom. Thank you to our fearless author, Senator Skinner, who I was just talking to, who does nothing small. She goes big. She swings for the fence. She has some other efforts and irons in the fire that she's going to get to next now that this is done. And thank you to our delegations on both sides who put on their policy caps and worked together to make what was already a very strong proposal even stronger through the iterative process, the deliberative process, the working together. So we're delivering for the people of California. Today is a win for corporate accountability. It's a win for standing up for consumers, and it moves the scale of justice more strongly in favor of everyday hardworking Californians. So proud to be part of this momentous occasion. Thank you. And I half introduced you already, but my former colleague, where we shared a district when I was in the Great Assembly, State Assembly, and who continues to do great work and just has my greatest admiration and respect, the author of this bill, Senator Nancy Skinner.
Thank you so much, Attorney General Bonta and my neighbor. It was easy to say yes to being the author of this bill. And I really want to give my appreciation to the governor and the governor's office for immediately jumping to the defense of Californians when they saw and we all saw these outrageously high prices. And I also want to thank the other sponsor of the bill, our Attorney General Bonta, who of course immediately joined with the governor's office because our Attorney General realized that he's empowered to ensure that industries in California do not price gouge. And yet, to do that, he needs information. We need to be able to prove that there's price gouging. But this was in the dark. We didn't have the data we needed. And this bill gives us those tools. It gives us that data. So I am so proud of all of my colleagues for passing this first-in-the-nation protection against price gouging by big oil. And as we've all mentioned, Californians faced outrageously high prices last year, prices that were forcing many families to spend minimum of $600 and higher extra a month in their family budgets. And I just, again, want to appreciate Governor Newsom for responding so decisively in proposing SB X12, and then all of the discussion that our colleagues and stakeholders had that greatly improved the product, greatly improved the bill that we have before us. So this is the strongest, most effective transparency and oversight measure in the nation, and this landmark law will allow us to hold oil companies accountable if they pad their profits at the expense of hard-working families. And with SB X12, California has sent a clear message to the oil industry. Open your books and prove that you're not price gouging. Otherwise, you, big oil, will pay the price, not consumers. And now I want to... And now it's my pleasure to introduce the person who had the guts to come forward and bring us this, our great governor, Gavin Newsom.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you. That's the actual bill, so I'm eager to sign it. And though I don't know, I guess we don't have to persuade anyone anymore. We're here in the spirit that defines this moment, and that's the spirit of remarkable unity. I think there's an old African proverb, some of you have heard, said, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. I could not be more grateful, more proud of the courage on display by each and every person you see up here, by the speaker and the pro tem that set the conditions that allowed this process to unfold over the course of the last few months. I cannot be more proud of the hard work of the two groups that were assembled in the Assembly and the Senate that day in, day out, consistent basis, every week strengthened this effort and made it 10x better than when we started. None of this was possible unless you were all willing to stand up and stand tall and have the courage of your convictions to truly represent 40 million Californians that were in desperate need to understand why. Why is it that we're paying at peak $2.61 more per gallon of gasoline than the national average? What is it in this state, year after year, that defines the terms of the gap that we pay that's unique in this nation? When you consider all the fees, all the unique environmental blends, there was still no justification coming from the oil companies. That mystery surcharge remains a mystery to this day. But finally, we have the ability now to get into that black box and put the light of day to begin to understand this web of complexity on the spot markets, the refineries, the relationships to the gas stations, global, not just domestic supply. Finally, we're in a position to look our constituents in the eye and say, we now have a better understanding of why you're being taken advantage of. Poor people, hardworking folks, folks out there with 1980 old beaten down cars, driving 1-2 hours a day to work. Folks out there in rural parts of California just struggling to make ends meet. $2.61 more per gallon, $6.42. That was in the aggregate. Folks down in LA, it's up to $9 for gasoline at the time when crude oil prices were dropping. And there were no increases in taxes, no increases in fees in the state of California. And you saw these folks spinning around 30-plus lobbyists working on their talking points from Friday to Monday, spinning to try to figure this out. But none more audacious than the committee you guys had yesterday, where one of the big oil, whatever these folks are, these paid folks, where it was simply asked, I think Senator Ting asked simple questions, and once again, why the big problem? What's the delta? They said, well, they laid it out. I guess they worked on this all weekend. They laid it out, and they said, well, just not a lot of competition. There's not a lot of competition, which is another way of saying, because we can screw you, because we chose to screw you. And that's exactly the point. These folks don't have your back. They don't care about you. What did Chevron do, just one of the big oil companies? They took $75 billion of this windfall and all the international market disruptions. They didn't invest it back to offset the burdens on working folks. They put it in their back pocket. $75 billion of stock buybacks and dividends increases. I mean, you saw some of these oil companies in a 90-day period, forget the annual profits, in a 90-day period, net profit, $63 billion. They don't have your back. So I want to thank each and every member of the legislature for having the backs of 40 million Americans that live in the greatest state in our union. I want to thank you for not backing away from this fight. I want to thank you for your power of emulation, because we proved we could actually beat big oil. I know there was a guy down there in the South, in a state I think called Florida, who, was sitting there, and he used this phrase. He said, there's a new sheriff in town, when he brought Mickey Mouse to his knees. Well, there's a new sheriff in town in California where we brought big oil to their knees. And I'm proud of this state, and I'm proud of the state of this legislature and their courage and convictions. So this is a big deal. That said, I'll close with humility that we got now a lot of work to do. We're setting up an oversight division at our CEC. We got to hire the right folks. We got to make sure the advisory committee is doing its job. We got to make sure we do justice to what we're promoting. We don't want to overpromise. Nothing's going to happen in the short term. Gas prices aren't going to drop immediately. We're finally getting the information. As I said to many members standing behind me, what improved this process and ultimately the product that I'll sign is it truly is ready, aim, fire, not ready, fire, aim. We seek to truly understand what has been impossible to understand in the past. And then we will go through a rulemaking process, a very public process, before we pull any triggers, mindful of unintended consequences, mindful of who we are up against. If you think for a second big oil is going to roll over this moment, think again. None of us are naive of what's coming next. So we'll maintain our vigilance. We're mindful of what we're moving towards, and we're mindful of our responsibility. And these are the final words. We did this, and I hope folks paid attention, with a cadence of some consideration that society becomes how we behave. None of us are naive. 90% of us will drive home, having filled up our tank of gas. Many of us will be flying back Thursday to our home districts in airplanes fueled by this industry. In an economy that's one of the strongest economies in the world. In a state that has the third largest refinery capacity in any state in the world. It's not that we dismiss oil. As all consumers, we have to be mindful that we are our behaviors. But I'm proud of this state that we laid out a marker years and years ago. It's interesting. It was laid out here in 1967 when a young man was sworn in by the name of Ronald Reagan in this rotunda right here. And when they established the Air Resources Board that gave California the ability to regulate tailpipe emissions, to address the health impacts of oil and fossil fuels. A guy named Richard Nixon that codified that in the Clean Air Act in 1970. I joke all the time, Republicans should look these two folks up, learn about Nixon and Reagan. As it relates to the rules that were established that allowed us to do things few other states are able to do, and we did that in the context of the work we're doing on zero-emission vehicles. And I hope you all continue to remind yourselves of the progress you're making in that space. $8.9 billion you included in the budget to advance that transition. Over 80,000 charging stations now up and operational in this state. Billions of dollars more to do more in low-income communities, more subsidies here than any other state to stack those subsidies for low-income communities. And we had 22.7% of all cars sold, almost a quarter of the cars sold in California in Q4 last year are electric vehicles. We want to dominate the future. 6 times more clean energy jobs in this state than fossil fuel jobs. We want to dominate the future, and we want to do it justly. And we want to make sure that transition leaves no one behind. And I want to just reinforce this point. One of the things I'm most proud of this legislation, they demanded more accountability in that transition to labor, to communities that will be disproportionately impacted by this transition in Kern County and other parts of our state. And we have a responsibility to follow through in terms of meeting the needs of those communities and those that will be impacted by this transition. And that is laid out prescriptively in this legislation as well, a responsibility to do that truly, justly, and to make sure we put real meat on those efforts. It's not just a rhetorical exercise. So across the spectrum, demand and supply, a strategy, a plan, a regulatory process of inclusivity and transparency, a framework of focus on dealing with unintended consequences, a responsible approach, but at a scale no jurisdiction has ever advanced anywhere that we know of, anywhere else on the globe. Thank you, Jamie, what you did, what so many of the environmental justice organizations did, what labor did, to business leaders that had the courage to say, wait a second, we're being screwed here as well. That had the courage to stand up, not the ones whose members of the board are members of WISPA that couldn't stand up because they didn't have your back or businesses' back, but those businesses groups that did. I want to thank that coalition because you helped create the conditions and set the expectations. You demanded more of us, and you gave us that room to exercise leadership that we're exercising here today. California, thank you. Thank you to the people of the state of California. You should not have had to endure these price spikes. You should not have to endure them in the future. We are going to get under the hood, and we are going to address this issue like no other jurisdiction has in this country. I'm proud of these guys, proud of all of you, and I look forward now to signing this bill and making it law.